October Santerelli, welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Thank you.
Did I
I'm
pronounce your name correctly?
Santarelli. Yeah, you were pretty close. It's very Italian.
Well, it's great to have you on. We've got a number of things to talk about, but first of all, we just want to get to know you a little bit.
Yeah.
I know you're going to be actively involved in the conference this year and have been in the past, correct?
It's actually my first year going, but
Okay.
I've worked with a bunch of the people who work there. Um, there's a couple of people who moderate and also do panels and mentoring, and I know one of the people who run it. So I've been meaning to go for a while. It's just the first year that I actually can.
Yeah. Well, I predict you're going to love it. So there.
I'm so excited. I know I'm gonna
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how long you've been writing? Just give us the little background.
Yeah. I am from Colorado, so it's actually local for me to go to the show. That's part of why I heard about it and why I know everybody. So,
Yeah.
I live up in Denver, and it's beautiful right now, just so you know. Like, we've had some really good weather lately. I've been writing seriously since 2019. But I started writing a long time ago. I was in seventh grade when I found out that you could still be a writer. And I went home that afternoon and I told my parents that that was what I was going to do. I'm going to be a writer, Mom. And she was like, "Oh no." And that's when I started writing.
Yeah, that's great. Was there anybody in particular you were reading or some sort of general genre that really fired you up?
Oh, fantasy for sure. Almost
Yeah.
everything I read is fantasy or spec fic. I have over 1,000 books in my house. You can
Wow.
only see a portion of them, um, but almost all of them are fantasy books. So
Yeah.
it's, I don't have much else. And I was reading Mercedes Lackey a long time before I started seriously writing things. One of my favorite authors still to this day.
Great. Is it what is it about fantasy that gets you going? What is it that you appeals to you?
I think I was always one of those people who believed in magic. I still believe in magic. I love stories that involve magic because it just kind of feels like it should be. Um, and I like the wonder and a little bit the escapism. Let's admit that fantasy books have some really cool stuff. I don't have dragons in Denver, and I regret it. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. It seems like fantasy's really coming back. I don't know. I don't really track trends, but it seems like fantasy, I'm on TikTok and you just see tons of fantasy stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, there's been a really big upsurge in it with the breakout of the romantasy subgenre as well, because now the romance writers are like, oh, I can have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
And that I think that's really contributing to the burst, as well as cozy fantasy, which is lower stakes writing. Lower stakes stories like The Princess Bride is considered a cozy because it's mostly about life and not as much about adventures. Yeah, so those are picking up steam.
Yeah. Does romantasy just mean the merging of romance and fantasy? I always sort of feel like there's some sort of code that it actually means a little bit more graphic stuff going on.
Um, well, I mean, you can write clean romantasy, that still is a thing,
Okay.
just the same as you can write clean romance novels. It is the merging of the two to a degree. The requirements are you need the magic and you need the happy ending. Just like you need a happy ending in a romance book and you need magic in a fantasy book. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And where does your works fall?
Dark fantasy, which is not that at all.
Yeah.
I am working on a cozy fantasy and I have an outline for a romantasy, but I mostly write dark fantasies and there's romance in them, but
Yeah.
it's it's not nearly as cheery and peppy as I am.
You're cheery and peppy, really?
Oh yeah, just a little.
I'm trying to pick up on that. Okay. Well, tell us about your books. What books do you have out?
I recently released in April an omnibus of novellas called The Book of the Witch's Son, which follows the son of a witch. We're very surprised. It follows the son of a witch and a fairy, though, as he's battling fairy kind to protect humanity. It crosses over 300 years following the same character, and it's a lot of fun, that one. I also have the first book in my Nightfall series, which is called City of Day, and that one is Murder Ghost Island. So every night ghosts pop out of the ground. So everybody sleeps on ships so that they don't get killed. And then, of course, our main characters end up on the island against their will and have to deal with the ghosts. And they find out that there are secrets, not just between each other, but between them and the ghosts and the people in charge. And it's a really political, but like a political fantasy. But the characters are fantastic, is the feedback that I'm getting back. So
Yeah. Inspired by something from the quote unquote real world, or is there a theme you're trying to get at or reflect on what's happening
it
out
was
here? And
originally inspired by Sinbad, the original Sinbad stories. Like there was Sinbad had to sleep on boats for an island, but then it it was during it was during 2018, 2019-ish, when things were a little unstable. And so I wrote about a ruling class that was corrupt and like blatantly so, and nobody seemed to care. So there was a little bit of a parallel to life. And
I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Wow, that's great. What, tell me about your path to publication. How do you get your books out? All of that.
Well, I have a publisher, and I recently signed with another one. Both of them are small press right now. The
Mhm.
Book of the Witch's Son is indie published, and I am hoping to put out a few more books just all by myself. I'm querying with big trad houses regardless. Like I'm gonna go all of it. I'm gonna do everything. Um, but I started my entire career with with dog training. Um, I was a private dog trainer, and one of the people whose dogs I trained was Jim Butcher. And and
Whoa.
then Jim Butcher introduced me to a bunch of people in the industry when he found out I was a writer. And and then he and Mercedes Lackey became my mentors. And then Misty Mercedes was like, "Hey, my friend David is looking for people to write in his series." And that was how I got my first book published here. Storm's Eye is written in David Brin's Out of Time universe. So because I train dogs.
Wow. Did you know going into working with Jim Butcher that it was Jim Butcher?
Not the very first session. His assistant
Yeah.
hired me, and I was like, okay. And I walked in and was like, oh, okay.
Hey,
I
were you familiar with him?
I know who he is, but I haven't read any of his work. So
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
so it was a really cool like 2 years that we were working together pretty consistently, and it was fantastic.
That's great. Wow. So do you have a day job as well? Do you still train dogs or are you
I do not. I actually took up a job as a sensitivity editor for LGBTQ plus and disability content. So I read other people's manuscripts for my day job and help them with slang and terminology and making sure characterization isn't a harmful stereotype and all kinds of things like that. Mostly for queer stuff. I've only read one book for disability content, but you know, it's a lot of fun anyway. I get to read a lot of good books.
Yeah, yeah. Do individual writers contact you or do publishers contact you or both?
I've worked with both. I mostly get contacted by indie authors and freelance, by themselves. A lot of times, sensitivity editing actually happens before you query, so it is a
Right.
lot on the author to get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And could you give us an idea what it might cost? Let's say I've got an 80,000 word manuscript. Do you have a set fee?
I charge by the hour. There are others who charge by the word. I charge by the hour, and for an 8,000 or 880, you said 80.
80,000. Let's, full length novel. 80,
That would take
90,000.
me 7 hours. So I could give you an estimate. I'm a little more expensive because I'm one of the oldest in the industry now. I've been doing this since it was basically became a thing. So I'm $40 an hour, but the average range is closer to 25 to 35. So you can find
Yeah,
them at Salt and Sage is one of the resources, and there is the Firefly Bookshop directory also has a list of freelance sensitivity editors.
great. This kind of segues, I think, into Colorado Gold and the workshops you're going
Mm-hmm.
to be giving. So, I mean, this is such an important topic because for folks who don't know, who are just coming up or just putting together their first novel and trying to bring it out into the world, I think what you said is so important that you want to get this kind of stuff right before you go out to after an agent or a publisher to make sure it's all just really thoughtful in terms of the issues you're talking about. So tell us a little bit about the workshops you're going to be giving and how you help writers reach the standards that are needed.
Yeah, the workshop that I'm most excited for is actually called um, Characterization Through Orientation and Identity, and it is specifically about writing sexualities and gender identities that you do not have and how to do it respectfully. I go into ways that you can use the inherent gender bias in the English language to help you with characterization and how you can use, you know, culturally accepted gender norms to make your characters feel stronger or feel more sensitive and mixing and matching until you get something really cool. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
That one I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Can you give us a few examples of maybe some things that you see a lot of in terms of mistakes or not mistakes, but just things that could be better and more accurate?
A lot of times I see people who are writing a scene with two characters of the same sex, and they're writing it like they're still two characters of the opposite sex. And that's because that is what most straight people are familiar with. um, but it is different when you're writing a scene between two people of the same gender. Um, we don't flirt the same way. We don't, we're not looking for the same things. So you have to look at your characterization and see if that's really how that character would react. Like if I were one of the two in the scene, yeah, okay, maybe one of them would be a little bit more feminine because I am. But if your character was like, I see it a lot in space opera where there's two space opera like gun-toting heroes, and all of a sudden one of them gets the girl role in the scene, and you're like, that's not how that would work. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there certain terminology you run across that just is weak and imprecise, or is it just how the characters are described? I mean,
It's mostly in how the characters are described. There's a lot of changing language in the queer community lately, so that is something to keep an eye out for. Like we're taking back the word queer, but older readers will be like, "Oh, that was, that was a slur in my time," because it was, and it's not now for millennials and Gen Zs. And terminology like it used to be that you called transgendered persons FTM or MTF, standing for female to male or male to female. However, we didn't want our birth identities to be the centered identity, so now we prefer to be called trans men and trans women. And so, terminology has changed and shifted. It's going to change and shift again. So that's mostly what I make sure people are aware of as well. A lot of people who aren't in the community don't know that this is happening.
yeah. What would you recommend? Let's say you were talking to an older white straight guy like maybe me, and I was writing a well-populated novel set in a city, and it's, just got, I don't know, let's say 30 or 40 characters.
Mhm.
One major character or maybe two points of view, but around them are just lots and lots of people. And I'm bringing this up because I've done it. And you get to the end of writing a draft and you say, all my people in this city are straight.
Mhm.
Do you recommend that I go back for and try to realistically portray a queer, try to bring in some queer characters in order to make for a more realistic city? And if I do that,
Mhm.
what are your suggestions about how I can make sure I get it right, other than pay you $40 an hour, which I'm happy to do, by the way.
Well, I think that representation, especially in media written by straight persons, is really important right now because it normalizes our existence, and makes it more acceptable for us to exist and, be here and be out in public. So I would suggest at least throwing in one character or even just a sentence. You can usually get away with just a sentence for one of those side characters that's only there for one scene. Throw in as they leave, okay, I gotta go back to my wife, said the lady. And you don't need to add much else to have a queer representation in your book. So you can do it with one sentence. You could figure it out. But if you're adding a queer character that has more lines, quote unquote, is on the stage a little bit longer, for those characters, you write what you know. You have lived experience with meeting queer people because you're talking to me right now. So you know how you know at least
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah,
So
I
if
do.
you've met, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you've met queer people and you know queer people, you can write about your main character, a straight person, interacting with queer people because you've done it. So
right.
I know that people are nervous that they're going to do it wrong, and that they're going to do bad representation. The only thing you need to avoid is harmful stereotypes. And a lot of those harmful stereotypes are like, one is called bury your gays, where the gay person has to die because being gay is bad and so they can't have a happy ending. So don't kill your gays, let them live to the end of the book, that'd be nice. And stereotypes like the wrist flipping, oh my god girl kind of gaze is we see a lot in media, and that's not how most queer people present themselves. It is how some do. But if everybody's writing that character and then I show up in a room, people are going to be like, okay, like, are you really, they're going to be judging my level of gay. It makes it harder for people who are masculine gay men to like be masculine gay men. People just don't think it. Yeah, so stereotypes is how you avoid that, and writing what you know, writing a little bit of who you know. So
Right. And it's a valid point because whether you're writing about uh, straight people and you're a straight writer, you also need to be accurate. You need to show versatility. You need to see these
mhm.
people as individuals on their spectrum within straight land, or see them within the spectrum of gay land,
Mhm.
correct? Or if you're trying to reach across and write within the perspective of a racial thing, which
Mhm.
obviously there's all sorts of controversy about whether we're allowed to do that or not these days. And we could have a discussion about that. But it's just again, the author's ability to see and accurately describe with, I guess, empathy.
Oh yeah, and there are sensitivity editors for people of color as well, so you could
Sure.
check in your manuscripts. I always include characters that have different skin tones in my work because I love reading it, and so I will write it as well. Um, so yeah, like it's
Yeah. 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 What is the reaction, would you say, from your clients when you push back on certain things? Or obviously you probably get everything from thank you, thank you, thank you to no, I'm going to keep it the way it is.
Actually, I have only had one person who pushed back, and that was actually a person who I opened their manuscript and I was like, okay, you need like two sensitivity editors for other stuff before I can get to it, and they were pretty upset with me. Um, but most of the time, one of the most controversial parts of a book that I read, at the end of it, uh, she had the queer character going to the family that kicked them out, and like they didn't accept them, but they tried. And I was like, why do you need to write this scene? Like these are the people who hurt your character. And maybe you don't need to do that. And we ended up talking a lot about, what it means to force queer people to be trauma bait in your stories, and how it's better to just like let them demonstrate healthy ways of dealing with this. So when the main character, the straight lady, was like, "Hey, gay character, you should go talk to your family," and he goes, "No," she should be like, "Okay, no," and a healthy interaction like that, so that people can learn how to do it. So
Yep. Very good. What is your other workshop about? You've got two at Colorado Gold?
I have three at Colorado
Three.
Gold.
All
Yeah.
right. Great.
Um, my other two are about like more on the writing behind the scenes stuff and not on the writing itself. I have neurodivergency and the creative process. So I have ADHD and I have had so many problems trying to figure out how to be a consistent writer when your brain is like, oh, squirrels every 2 seconds. So I did a lot of research. I talked to psychologists and scientists, and I put together a presentation about all of the science behind why ADHD does it and how you can work with your ADHD to write more often and more consistently. So that one is one of my favorites. And every time people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. And it changes their entire writing procedure. And I love it. They love it. So that one is definitely going to be awesome.
Well, we don't want to give away too much because we want to pack the room for your
Oh,
workshop,
yeah.
but can you give us just a one little insight into what are the techniques to deal with that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is body doubling, which is something that is going around on TikTok, so it's very familiar to some people. But it's when you're having trouble working as somebody who has a neurodivergency, if you put somebody else in the room and they're doing something, they don't have to be doing the same thing as you. They don't even have to be like actually working, but if they're doing something next to you, your brain goes, "Oh, it's doing something time," and you're more likely to get your stuff done.
How do you do what do you have? I'm joking, but do you pay somebody to be a body double or how do you do
I
that?
mostly go and bother my roommate. Like, I'll just show up in his office and be like, I'm gonna write here for a second. And he's like, okay. Um, or I go to cafes. Cafes are really good for neurodivergent people. My favorite one is at the bookstore because all of the bookstore employees know me really well and they'll yell at me if I'm not writing. So that one
We need
works really well.
more we need more books on these shelves. Keep writing,
Yep,
October.
exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and the third workshop.
Yeah, the third one is writing with a disability or chronic illness. And that one talks about the ergonomics of writing with disability and accommodations that you can take, all kinds of them. But it also talks about the mental health behind being a writer with a disability and seeing all these other people who can do so much more than you and learning how to handle that and work with it without beating yourself up too much.
Wow. Very good. All about productivity and focus, just being able to get through issues and not letting these things become barriers because we need to hear from these voices.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, yep. And you're also involved, I know, in the mentoring opportunities where people who don't, if you don't know, if you're brand new to the Colorado Gold registration process, you can sign up for, of course, the conference itself, and there's lots of options about meals and all that. But then there are these add-on experiences you can have, and one of them is to make a connection with a mentor, and you're going to be one of the group of, I think it's 8 or 9 or 10 mentors who are available.
Mhm.
What is your approach, and why is, I know for me, having had many, many mentors, it was very important. What's kind of your approach in thinking about that?
My approach is to work with you to get to your goal. Success looks different for everybody, and what you're working towards looks different for everybody. If you're working on like you really want a trad deal, okay, I have resources about querying, and I can give you those. But if you're mostly, your goal is to write your book, and there's something in your book that's not going right, okay, we're going to talk about your writing instead, and I'll see if I can be a soundboard for you to figure out what you need to do and make 17 suggestions so that you can take the 18th one I didn't say. Um, and like I like to talk to the person that I'm mentoring. I've been a SIFWA mentor the for oh gosh, it's my third year. We're about to wrap up next week. So
What is
SIFWA
that?
is Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association, which is one of the larger writing associations. I've been a mentor for them for 3 years, and that's what I do is I work on your goals for as long as I can. So
Yeah. And do you have a mentor?
I do still talk to Mercedes Lackey about things when I have questions. And I don't talk to Jim as much these days because we mostly write different genres. Um, and so I get a little bit more out of the interactions with Mercedes. But yeah, I would say that she's absolutely one of my mentors, and she's just so much fun. Most of the time it's cat pictures though, I have to admit. Like we're just exchanging pet pictures. So
Well, it seems like that's about 80% of most what's online anyway,
oh
Instagram, TikTok, and
yeah.
yeah, pretty crazy. Are you on various social media channels? Are you pretty active out there?
I am on various social media channels. I took a little bit of a break recently because I got COVID and was dying. So I did not post for a little bit. And
You don't mean literally dying, you mean it was
I mean,
pretty miserable.
my doctor was watching for me to come in for a little bit there. It got pretty bad, but I am fine now. And I'm trying to get back into it. I'm setting up my social media. I tend to pre-make things, and I ran out of pre-made stuff, so I have to make some of that, and then I'll be back to being active. But I am on Instagram as at O_K_writes, like writing a book, WRITES. And I'm on TikTok at OK Writes with no underscores. And uh and I have my website, octoberksanterelli.com, and my newsletter is there, and my sign up for my newsletter is there, and that's actually where I'm most active is with my newsletter.
Very good. Congratulations on that. I have, for some reason, no ability to put out a regular newsletter. I've got one and it just doesn't draw me. I can't put the time into it that it needs to be given. It's just not in my bones, I guess. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
put out my newsletter every 2 weeks like clockwork.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
I'm jealous. Very jealous. Well, this has been a great rundown of your world. We appreciate it so much. As we wrap up, we always like to give our guests a chance to shine the light on another writer or a particular book and kind of pay it forward a little bit. So, giving you the floor.
Since it's Pride Month, I'm going to recommend a queer author who writes queer stories. If you have not heard of or read F.T. Lukens, Lukens, you absolutely should. One of my favorite books by them is Spellbound, which is a non-binary romance. They've done In Deeper Waters, which is a gay Little Mermaid retelling, and it's fantastic. And So This Is Ever After is a really, really funny book about queer relationships, and they're all fantastic. They are all out. FT just put out another book in April, actually, called Otherworldly. So there's plenty for you to choose from.
Wow. Sounds like a productive writer. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Well, and to add to your, how many books in your house again?
Couple thousand, well, almost
Yeah.
1,500. I'm working on it.
It's a great addiction, I have
It
to
is.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. October, thank you so much for your time today. And we'll see you at Colorado Gold.
Awesome. See you there. Can't wait.